It's time to journey through sci-fi.
Hello and welcome to Journey Through Sci-Fi. My name is James.
My name is Matt.
So, welcome to another episode. In today's episode, we're going to be looking at two new films. So we're looking at Ghost in the Shell from 1995. And what's the other one we're looking at, Matt?
We're looking at 99's classic, The Matrix.
Absolute classic. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the lead up to these two films. So it was just in the break of the potential Y2K bug. And what other kind of stuff we're going to be talking about today, Matt?
We're talking about the kind of the end of the century vibe that these two films capture and the way that AI had been developing in the real world, and everything felt like it was kind of accelerating technology-wise.
Definitely, sort of like with the advent of the internet, technology became sort of a lot more a part of people's lives around about this time throughout the 90s.
Two really great AI films this week. I'm really looking forward to talking about them.
Yeah, okay, let's get to it. So let's talk a little bit about the whole Y2K thing then. So how much do you remember about that? Because we must have been, how old must we have been during that time?
So 11, going
11.
on 12.
Okay, so just about old enough to sort of know that something was freaking the adults out a little bit.
Well, yeah, I remember it being really like hyped up as a massively serious thing. And at the time, and I remember the explanation that was given was that all existing computer systems were supposedly designed to, they've only got 2 digits in their year.
Yeah.
So when they get to 99 turning into 2000, the computer's going to suddenly think it's the year 1900. And for some reason that would cause all computer systems to fail, possibly including nuclear warhead controlling systems and stuff like that. That was the like hyperbolic fear that kind of filtered down to me.
Yes, it was that, and wasn't it something to do with all the banks? Everyone's credit would go back down to zero
was
as
it?
well.
Okay.
A bit sort of
I don't
Fight
remember
Club-esque. I think it was something like that
Right.
as well.
Okay.
But yes, there was this big fear around this potential Y2K bug, this thing which would shut down all of the computers all over the world, and no one knew what would happen.
Yeah.
No one knew what would happen as soon as it hit midnight and the year 2000 hit.
And a quick spoiler, nothing at all.
Nothing
happened.
at all. It was all fine. People thought planes were going to fall out of the sky.
Yeah.
Missiles would go flying.
So I was 11, and I was at the time aware enough of that background with the computers and the date thing to kind of wonder what actual impact that would have. Like, I didn't understand how a computer thinking that it was 1900 rather than 2000, how it could possibly cause a plane to fall out of the sky or nuclear warhead systems to fail. Like, I didn't get it at the time, and even now I still kind of feel that way because nothing happened. I feel like that kind of justified my suspicion of it.
Yeah.
Just what was the fear? Why would that be an issue?
I mean, I suppose if it had happened, it would have taken everyone back into the dark ages almost, because everything is so dependent on computers throughout the 90s, because it's on that build-up, isn't it?
Sure.
So everything's electronic, so we don't know kind of what an impact that would have had.
But it was just then. It was just like an abstract fear, a what if.
Yeah, but then I remember the whole Nostradamus thing as well, because Nostradamus had predicted the world would end in the year 2000. I think it was like July 99 or something.
Yeah, and that was seemed to get a lot of traction in 1999, as if Nostradamus had been this mythical figure forever, and I hadn't really heard of him before 1999. I mean, I was only a kid, but did anyone take him seriously? Doesn't he have a load of predictions that were just
I think it was a bit hit and miss.
Guff?
Did he say something about the Twin Towers or something like that?
The thing is, though, I think he said some cryptic stuff that you could link to Hitler, Twin Towers, 1999, but he also just said a ton of other stuff that doesn't mean anything. So Nostradamus had stuck his oar into this whole Y2K thing, and he was influencing that kind of thinking as well, and everyone was just freaking out, and then nothing happened.
But nothing happened. It was all good.
It was a big cultural event in 96 onwards.
Yeah, I think so. I think because I think both these films kind of are in that bracket of time, because because 95 is where Ghost in the Shell came out, and then 99 when The Matrix came out was sort of like bang on trend for this incoming potential apocalypse. Yeah. Scary stuff.
Yeah, and it was serious at the time. It felt serious at the time.
Yeah.
There were adults who were worried about it.
I remember I was a bit freaked out as a kid, not really knowing what was going on, and having a very overactive imagination.
Yeah, with the benefit of hindsight, I mean, adults get freaked out about stuff all the time, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Now.
Don't tell a 11-year-old kid
Yeah,
that
but
could be
it-
the end of the world.
Certainly, it was a permeating sense of fear that, as a child, you could feel.
Definitely. So that sort of sets the scene for these two films. So there was that fear about technology, that fear about sort of like what's coming next in the sort of like the next century. What is the year 2000 going to have for us? So let's talk a little bit about Ghost in the Shell first then.
Sure.
So this was it is one of the biggest Japanese animated films ever to have been released.
It's an amazing film.
Yeah, really well put together. And we'll talk a little bit about how it's inspired other films later on. But did you know it had a simultaneous worldwide release as well?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so it was released all over the world at the same time.
That must have been a huge deal for an Japanese anime movie.
And I think that was off the back of the popularity of the manga itself. So the original manga. It sold all over the world. So there was a big hype around this film. So what were your first experiences of Ghost in the Shell? Do you remember it from when you were younger?
Yeah, I was that kind of teenager who was buying like all the big like Japanese manga movies.
Yeah, me too.
I loved it, but I have to say, and I've owned it, I've had it on DVD since I was, probably like early 2000s. But I have to say, watching it this time, honestly, it was like I'd not seen it before. Like I must have seen it, 4 or 5 times before, but the plot must have gone way over my head every other time I watched it, because I definitely didn't know some of the big story beats. I felt a lot of the same like emotions because it's a really great moody film. And I felt all those things coming back, and I still enjoyed all the same things that I enjoyed, but it's just like I just didn't understand the plot previously, I think.
There's so much to it. And I agree with you. It all went over my head when I watched it, like when I was much younger. I remember being very interested in the whole manga, because manga had just released there was the video manga, wasn't there? Like the anime, and that was...
I've seen your DVD on your shelf, and I think you've got the same version of the DVD. Has the extras got the manga movies trailer roll with the mad capsule markets?
There's loads of them.
I watched some of it after I watched Ghost in the Shell, and I had to turn it off because it was like, felt like it was going to be 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
But it was so nostalgic for me. I knew all of those. I don't think I've seen any of the ones advertised, but I've watched that. When I was a kid, I must have watched that trailer roll dozens of times.
Yeah.
All the Mad Capsule Market songs that are on there, because they were really
Mad
big from
Capsule Market, yeah.
one of the Tony Hawk games.
Yeah,
They had a
I
big
forgot
song on
about that.
Yeah,
Brilliant.
and they just used like the entire album's worth of music for that trailer roll.
Yeah. And because I remember there was things like Part Labour, which is the same director as Ghost in the Shell. So that was one of the manga DVDs I had. There was Virus, which wasn't a very good manga series.
Some of them look mad.
Yeah, they all sorts of crazy ones.
Vampire Hunter D's on there. That's quite a famous one, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen Vampire Hunter D either, but so like there was that whole anime was just becoming popular sort of around about that time, and Ghost in the Shell was sort of the pivotal moment in that. So how would you explain the plot of Ghost in the Shell? Because it's more complicated than I remember, because I just remember the big action scenes.
And so I've seen this film several times, like I said, but I love it. I've never dipped into the franchise anymore. I haven't read any of the manga. I haven't seen any of the other versions of this film or the series they did afterwards.
Did you ever play the video game?
Yeah, I played a demo of it.
Yeah, and you're riding around
in
I think they call them Fujikomas.
Is that the thing she fights at the end?
Yeah, but the ones they have in the video game are like little red small tanks, basically, and they're just like the big one at the end.
Oh, right.
But yeah, in the video game, you were playing one of those.
Yeah, that's all. I sort of remember that, but that's all. The plot-wise, I think the reason a lot of it went over my head when I was originally watching it is it dives straight into a world and a story, and you're given really no context on who Section 9 are and what they do. And even watching it now as an adult, it was beneficial to just quickly look on Wikipedia at the first sort of paragraph of the
Yeah.
plot summary to understand. Because if you do look at that, it's like context that simply isn't in the movie. Like, this is what Section 9 is. This is what they do. This is what the country they're in is, the vague sort of undefined country. So it's about their counter-terror unit, amongst other things, particularly like cybercrime, which is obviously a much bigger thing in this futuristic world. They're on the trail of a particular very dangerous hacker called the Puppet Master.
Yep.
And it's just assumed at the start of the film that that's a person in America, they think, who is a cyber terrorist, extremely dangerous. And as the plot moves on, and this is the stuff that I just didn't know was the plot of the movie, the Puppet Master reveals himself to Section 9, surrenders himself and wants asylum, and it's revealed that he's actually a sentient computer program.
Yeah, and he specifically says that. He doesn't refer to himself as an AI later.
He rejects the idea of being an AI.
Yeah.
In a scene where a huge chunk of expositionary dialogue just rolls out of his mouth.
There was a lot of the exposition in that. There's lots of dialogue where I had to rewind it just to try and make sure that I was understanding it right, because it's very dense.
It's incredibly dense. Yeah, I was doing that. Are we talking about the same scene where the Puppet Master has been lured into a sort of cybernetic shell body?
So that one, definitely.
And it wakes up and it starts talking to them.
Yeah, so that scene's like, it's intense. The dialogue's like dense, lots of enses in that. So also like there's so many big monologue scenes where they're talking in such a philosophical way about the idea of what it's like to be human and that kind of thing. But so going back to the plot again, so they're on the trail of this puppet master, and it's got this backdrop of, is it set in Hong Kong?
According to Wikipedia, it's an unnamed Asian nation.
Yeah,
I think it might be. I think the idea might be that it's far enough in the future that the nations that we're familiar with might not exist in the same way.
Yeah,
boundaries might be different.
Yeah, it could be. It's either way. It's set in this futuristic sort of city. It's very close to what we would see sort of now and would have been in the 90s, but the technology everywhere. So the first thing you see. One of the first things you see is Major Kusanagi, who is the female protagonist of the film itself. She's plugging stuff into the back of her neck, isn't she, or taking plugs out or something.
Yeah,
so she can get her like optical camouflage working. So you're already in a world where you know the technology aspect of it is such a fundamental part of their world.
Yeah, and going into this movie having misunderstood the plot, or just missed the plot when I was younger, I couldn't remember, and it wasn't clear whether the Major was human or an AI.
Yeah.
And that is made very clear about halfway through the film, exactly what everyone is, because it's kind of the whole point of the film. But it's very unclear. I thought she might be AI, like Data from Star Trek or something.
Yeah, she does come across that way as well, because it's like when you first see her when she's waking up in the morning, it's very sort of everything. I always say like things look mechanical on screen. So she gets up, she just opens the curtains, gets dressed and goes. She's not doing any of the things you would do when you wake up in the morning, like brush your teeth, sort of like have breakfast. She's just sort of like get up and go. And there's like, it's a very quick scene, but that's kind of what I got from that bit, that opening bit where you see the landscape and the curtains are open.
Yeah, and it's a
backdrop.
very detached performance in the vocal performance. I watched it with the dub. I don't think I've ever watched the original dialogue, and I don't know if I would pick up on those vocal cues, but it's definitely a detached performance in the vocal, and she's not animated as a very emotional character. And they deliberately kind of juxtapose that against the guy that she's brought into the unit, who is
Tosuga.
He's got his revolver, so he likes kind of old-fashioned technology, and they make a point of saying that he's got only minor cybernetic implants. Like he's very mostly human body.
It's him and the chief who only have like brain implants or something like that.
Something like that. They've got the minimum. And to the point of the Major's body, that is explained later when they have that existential conversation on the boat, that basically, her and Batu, is that his name? Are fully cybernetic bodies, like as cybernetic as you can get, really. They've had so many upgrades that there's very little, more for the Major than him, I think, but there's very little human tissue left in all of that.
Yeah. So that's interesting, looking at sort of AI in general, because a lot of this is kind of like it's the sort of synchronization of AI and humans and how technology has sort of melded into like who they are, so much so that you don't know what's what and who's who.
And that's what is causing a bit of anxiety for the Major. Kusanagi's anxiety is coming from that sense of not knowing what she is, who she is. She is explicitly defined as a human, but she reacts to that by kind of making the point that she's not comfortable with the fact that she's only human by definition. Batu's trying to comfort her by saying, what's your problem? People treat you as human. And that makes her very uncomfortable because she doesn't want to only be human because she's treated as a human. She wants something more in her mind, in her soul, that confirms that for her.
Yeah.
And that's really important for what's going to happen at the end of the film, that to sort of build up those motivations for her.
She refers to everything in terms of sort of like destiny. Is it destiny or fate?
Does she?
I might be getting confused with The Matrix, but it seems like both of them, you get to decide your own destiny. You get to decide your own fate.
Oh, yeah. She says something about carrying with her a sense of her own destiny, and that in conjunction with other unique things about her are the things that she sees as piecing together to make her a unique individual. She's really like struggling and putting a lot of mental effort into just defining what it is that even makes her a human, and she doesn't really seem satisfied with what she comes away from that.
Yeah, because that whole that monologue scene on the boat it's very powerful.
Yeah.
And that's one of the ones I had to rewind and watch a couple of times
me
to
too.
try and get what was going on. And is it like a contra zoom? Is that what they call it? It looks like a
the Jaws zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it is. It's hard to recognize in animation. I didn't realize that was what they were doing, but that is exactly what they do, isn't it?
Yeah, and that sort of like, that makes it even more intense and claustrophobic, sort of the background's going forward as the camera's going in.
Yeah.
And of course,
that's so interesting because that's such a camera technique.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting when animation does that.
Because I think also in terms of the animation for this, it was quite revolutionary in what it was doing. It's got, you don't realise when you're watching it, but it's all very realistic. All of the movements.
Movements are very fluid and to a different point, but the sense of realism, something I love about the city, is that it's a very modern, realistic looking city. Like you said, it looks recognisable. There's all this technology, but it's kind of mostly within the people, like inside their bodies. And they have all this like futuristic weaponry and vehicles and stuff. But the city, she rides in a gondola, like a big taxi gondola, doesn't she? I love that montage. It's one of the best bits in the film.
Great. And you see all the mannequins again.
You see mannequins, and there's a great bit where she looks into an office and she sees a woman who seems to look exactly like her.
Yeah.
They just lock eyes, and that's it. Like nothing more is made of it, but it's just weird.
But that's like an interesting concept as well, because the whole idea is Kusanagi her body is owned by the company. So could there be another person walking around in the same body?
Oh, right, yeah.
And is this other person living a completely different life? They're just an office worker, whereas she's working for Section 9.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't kind of take that read from it, but that's a really good
Or is she
point.
just imagining that?
I took it more like that. Like she's having this kind of existential dread of being unsure who she is.
Yeah.
And I thought she might have just been imagining that, but they don't play it that way. They don't do... another film might do it as a double take where she looks back and the woman's different or the woman's gone or something. It's just played very naturalistically. She's got this megatech body that, it could be in use, in mass production for all we know, for all she knows.
I mean, Megatech is a great title for the company.
Megatech body.
It does what it says on the tin. It's mega technology.
What I found that they do kind of rattle off all of this characterization for Kusanagi, which is really important, and it has to be there for how the film ends. But it's part of the reason that this plot kind of went over my head when I was younger, because like you said, it's really dense. But it did really make me want to dip into that wider franchise and maybe read the manga that this is based on, because I could see it being very satisfying for that kind of character development to build up over the course of, dozens of issues. I don't know how long it is, but to have a bit more time with that character development and the cat and mouse with the puppet master before we learn more about the puppet master.
Yeah, it'd be interesting, sort of like. So I read the manga when I was like a lot younger.
All right.
One of the things I do remember is so her character seems a lot younger in the manga.
Okay.
Like she looks physically younger, whereas I think it was a very deliberate choice for them to make her look older in this version, because obviously, if it was a young character delivering all these monologues, it just wouldn't have had the same impact. There's something about her being the age she is and sort of like a bit like battle hardened, like more of a soldier.
Yeah.
Because she's adult. And if she'd been sort of like the teen looking character that she is in the manga, I don't think that would have translated as much.
So is the ending a bit of a play on that?
I think so. But then I think the ending works more with what's actually happening in the narrative.
Okay.
So it's all working up towards the when she meets the puppet master, isn't it? First off.
So the revelation that the puppet master is not a hacker but a sentient AI. It's a program that was developed by a rival, not a rival, but another government agency. So it's a big scandal, and that other government agency wants to capture or destroy the puppet master because the program that became sentient was being used for illegal espionage, basically.
Yeah. And somewhere along the line during that espionage, it developed sentience.
In the sea of information.
That monologue is so good.
It's really good. A really good performance from
also
the puppet master.
I think it's extra intense because it's got that whole, it's delivered in that way that they established earlier on. So the way, so they don't just speak dialogue. They don't speak it literally. They're all connected by their brains. They've got some sort of weird computer network.
They essentially speak telepathically, for all intents and purposes.
Which is quite good for the animators because then they can just have just characters not moving at all, yet these big monologues are happening.
They love that. They love that in anime, don't they? Or characters talking, but they're positioned close to the camera, so their mouth is actually off screen. And they'll just deliver a monologue and you just see their eyes and it's just stationary.
And they kind of establish this different sort of way of speaking, but it's sort of like they use like a spatializer or something to make it sound sort of a little bit robotic, a little bit here.
Yeah, it does sound very strange. And it's interesting that in the film they do switch between methods of communication. So that talking that way, that semi-telepathic way, has for these soldiers, practical usage, which is when they're chasing down a suspect and they're not near each other. They need to be able to, like walkie-talkie. But then they will be having these existential conversations where they might switch to speaking that way, and it's not immediately clear why they've done that. Yeah, there might be an animation reason, but I think there's more to it in terms of what it means for the characters to communicate to each other that way.
Yeah, because this whole sort of this network of their minds.
Yeah.
And it's not like a phone call or anything. They'll just pop up into each other's minds and start chatting. So it's just sort of like, how do they deal with that?
Yeah.
Just on a day-to-day basis.
And then it's implied that Kusanagi says something that way that she didn't say, that's just kind of beamed into her head from the network, which I assume by the end of the movie we find out that's the puppet master trying to reach out to her, because he says that he's met her, he's been following her a little bit, stalking her a bit, and presumably that message is something that's filtered through from his reaching out to her. But it hits her at a moment on that boat where she's already having this existential anxiety about how much of a human she really is, and then she's kind of influenced by something that she's not controlling with her own brain, which hits her at a real weak point in that kind of mood that she's in.
And that whole the whole idea of like, so the puppet master sort of like almost hacks her in that way.
Yeah.
And that's like a recurring thing in the film as well.
Ghost hacking, do they call it?
Ghost hacking. So
yeah,
maybe we should explain a little bit about what.
Yeah.
So what did you get from the ghost in the shell?
Yeah. My notes straight off the bat, because you are thrown into this world and you're given no context on it. my notes straight away, the first thing I wrote down was ghosts appear to be an AI's internal brain, which is wrong. Actually, I got that completely wrong.
Yeah.
So at that moment, I thought that Kusanagi was an AI, and I thought the ghost was referring to her sort of central program.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's used in this world as it's a very specific term, basically referring to human consciousness.
Yeah.
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 So they've all got these robotic brains, and I think you can have a kind of husk cyber body that has no soul, and it has as good of a brain maybe as every human does, because they've all got these cybernetic things plugged into their brains. But it doesn't have a ghost, which is absolutely fundamental. There is a difference between a husk produced by Megatech or whatever it is.
The shell.
Yeah, that's the shell, exactly. If it doesn't have the ghost, then it is not a person. And I think in the world of the movie, at the start of the movie, ghosts cannot be manufactured. That's the public opinion. That's what everyone believes to be true.
So you can't manufacture a consciousness.
No, but you can move it around. And that's what Kusanagi thinks might have happened to her. Her memories seem to be a bit fuzzy. She's not even sure, where she originally came from. And that's why she's worrying if she's even real.
Yeah, and that's something they never really establish in the film.
Yeah.
The whole idea is she real? Because she can't remember being human ever.
Yeah.
So what does that mean? All of her memories
Yeah.
are a lie? Are
And
they programs?
Batu's argument is, you do remember being human because you are human. Your memories are of being human. But she's trying to cast her mind back to a point before Section 9, I think, for her.
Yeah, when she had her original body, potentially.
Yeah, she's holding on to that concept, and she doesn't really know what that is. But it's very important to her to know, to rely on the information that a ghost cannot be manufactured, because if it can, then she has more doubt on her own ghost and what she is and if she was ever human. So the puppet master revealing himself to her drives that interest from her. And this is all stuff that I just completely went over my head. When she's going out there to chase him down, so Section 6 kidnap that body that's got the puppet master in and try and abscond with it. And the major goes after it, and she's disobeying orders to go after it. She's putting herself in serious danger. And it's an amazingly cool showdown. And that was all I took it for when I first watched it. But with all of that backing of the uncertainty that she's got and her personal need to speak to this AI.
Yeah, she wants to ghost hack the puppet master so she can talk to him and find out what's in his head or their head. It's not clear if it's like a he or a she, really.
Yeah, sure. That's really important for that motivation for her of why she's sticking her neck out like that. And she gets, ruined by that tank. She almost gets her head exploded.
Yeah, her arch, she rips her arms off trying to open the top of it.
Yeah.
That scene's brilliant.
Yeah, amazing. Well, and I didn't get why. I remember watching it for the first time when I was a kid being like, why'd she do that? Why'd she put so much effort in when she's going to break her body? What a waste of time.
She doesn't even open the top, does she? She's
No.
just
Well, I guess cyborgs like myself have a tendency to be paranoid about our origins. Sometimes I suspect I'm not who I think I am. Like maybe I died a long time ago and somebody took my brain and stuck it in this body. Maybe there never was a real me in the first place and I'm completely synthetic like that thing.
You've got human brain cells in that titanium shell of yours. You're treated like other humans, so stop with the angst.
But that's just it. That's the only thing that makes me feel human. The way I'm treated. I mean, who knows what's inside our heads? Have you ever seen your own brain?
It sounds to me like you're doubting your own ghost.
What if a cyberbrain could possibly generate its own ghost, create a soul all by itself? And if it did, just what would be the importance of being human then?
So Ghost in the Shell's world, I think the name was based on a book from 1967 by Arthur Koestler.
The Ghost in the Machine.
The Ghost in the Machine. So do you know much about this book?
No,
I
tell
don't
me
know
about this.
terribly much about it, to be honest.
Okay.
But from what I understand, it's a so obviously it's dealing with philosophy and psychology, and the title was coined by Gilbert Ryle to describe the Cartesian dualist account of the mind-body relationship.
Sure, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know exactly what all that means, but this whole mind-body relationship is so key to the film. And at one point, they were going to call Ghost in the Shell mobile armored riot police.
Yeah, badass Japanese anime name.
Which would have been sort of like...
I think it is called that in Japan, or
Is it?
it was originally called that in Japan.
Yeah.
But the author wanted to call it Ghost in the Shell, and it's so important.
Yeah.
It sounds cool. It sounds mysterious. It sounds like it doesn't really mean anything, Ghost in the Shell, but it's incredibly important for the central theme of the movie, which is what is the ghost in Kusanagi's shell.
Yeah, and then that reflects back to sort of like ideas about what it is to be human, and sort of like the ideas of the soul and that kind of thing. Because when I originally heard the title, I was like, oh, so the ghost is like a literal ghost, like a soul. Whereas you watch it again, it's consciousness. But again, is consciousness not part of the soul?
Yeah, it's more sci-fi way of looking at a bit of a softer concept of soulhood, if that's a word.
Yeah.
You were asking about, you mentioned ghost hacking, and it's a horrifying concept in this film. It's really dark. It's probably, I think, one of the darkest kind of things they do in this film, which is that because everyone has these cyber brains that have that still have a ghost in, they are susceptible to just any kind of normal hacking. It's a mechanical brain now. It's hooked up to networks. Malicious people can exploit that and get into it and take it over. So you've got these characters running around just doing the dirty work of the puppet master, and they've got no idea that they're doing it. They're doing it completely unconsciously, and you can be snapped out of that. You can be told you've been ghost hacked, and you can kind of come back down to earth, but you'll never get your original memories back.
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
Yeah, because they completely rewrite that guy's life. The guy who has the like garbage truck.
Yeah.
And yeah, the whole he believes he has a wife and kids. He
Yeah.
believes that's what he's doing this for. And then he finds out later he's always just been like a bachelor.
Yeah.
They go to his flat and they show him pictures which he thinks are of him and his wife and kids.
Well, he tried to show his colleague a picture of his cute daughter. Look at my cute daughter, and the colleague's like, I don't want to look at that. And then we get a twist on that like 20 minutes later, where he's shown his own photo in the police station. It's just a picture of him. It's an unsettling picture of him kind of looking too close to the camera. It's just very weird and unsettling and creepy, and it's a horrible it's a great sci-fi concept, but it's horrible.
And I think having that in the background backs up why Kusanagi's having all these feelings of self-doubt. If you're seeing people which can just have their memories just wiped and just made into a whole different person, a whole different personality, what does that mean about your consciousness and your identity and sort of like your idea of the self? How can you view your own identity if you know that other people can just wipe it and completely change it?
Yeah. There's a nice bit of commentary on, I guess, what police have to go through in seeing really awful things and dealing with really awful things just in the course of their work, and then how that can be quite traumatic for them. And that's kind of what Kusanagi's going through, dealing with her own feelings of mental insecurity, and then seeing someone who's been ghost hacked, which is just would be an awful thing. Like if you were working in law enforcement and that was a possibility, if you saw that happen, it would be awful to deal with.
Yeah, because obviously if you work in law enforcement, you must have to see horrendous things in a sort of like a daily basis almost, and you have to sort of like close yourself off from it. But then, yeah, with Kusanagi, that's a whole nother layer again. She's seeing these things that could happen, and realizing this could be something that could happen to me, and I'm very close to sort of like having that happen.
This is the photo you showed to your coworker. Who do you see?
I had a picture of her. She was there. She was smiling like an angel.
What's her name? How old is she? Where'd you meet your wife and when did you marry her? I'm sorry to put you through this, pal. Come on. Who do you see?
If this is all a lie, what happens? Will I get my old memory back?
Your original memory will never be fully restored, and there might be residual simulation. We don't have the technology yet to handle Cymex erasures. I'm sorry.
So you spotted a quote on the back of the DVD case, didn't you?
Yes, I thought you would enjoy this one. So on the back of the DVD cover, it says, "The kind of film James Cameron would make if Disney let him."
Yeah. I mean, I love that quote.
Yeah. How do you feel about that?
I feel like James Cameron doesn't need Disney to let him make great movies.
That quote was from Empire as well, Empire
Okay.
magazine.
Yeah, I think it's definitely up his alley, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a great sci-fi cyberpunk movie
That's
with
it.
interesting questions raised in it. Has he really made a movie like that? I don't think so.
No, not really.
He's done. I mean, Terminator has some
Cyberpunk-y
cyberpunk
stuff
aspects,
in, yeah.
especially the first one. What movies has he done where movies that raise questions about identity, human identity?
Avatar's got certain concepts like that.
Avatar's an interesting kind of like biological twist on VR stuff. Downloading your brain into a remote body is very similar, I guess, to what's happening in Ghost in the Shell and in The Matrix, but it's done in a very biological way. It's a host cloned alien body, isn't it,
Yeah.
rather than a sort of digital construct.
So you wouldn't necessarily agree with that. You don't think that James Cameron would make Ghost in the Shell if he was on a Disney budget making an animated film?
I'd love to see it if he did.
Yeah. I think it'd be interesting. I don't think he would ever do an animated film though. I think he loves like
No, you're right.
cameras and
Yeah.
real life stuff more.
Yeah, unless he just invented a whole new way of animating things.
Which I mean he probably could to be fair.
Great guy.
Anyway, we all know how much you love James Cameron. So what were the most memorable scenes in this film? What were the scenes that you remember from watching it previously and that you sort of like really enjoyed watching again this time?
The biggest one is definitely the showdown sequence.
Yeah.
With where she fights the tank, which feels very Blade Runner-y. It's in a dilapidated old building. It's raining. It's very emotionally hyped up, especially watching it again now and understanding what the stakes are for Kusanagi to sort of win this fight and get to the Puppet Master. I mean, in my head, that was the end of the movie. I couldn't remember all of the stuff where she actually gets to the Puppet Master. They have that long conversation and everything afterwards. I thought it was just a big showdown with the tank, which was cool.
Yeah.
But the intensity of that I felt it a lot more this time.
Everything about that scene is great. Yeah. And so apparently the guys which were working on the animation went and shot guns at a firing range to sort of figure out how it would look realistically, depending on what they shoot. And there's something like if you shoot metal, you get sparks come out, which is in all these action films. But if you shoot like stone or rock, then you get that sort of like imprint and that sort of chipping out. And they really exploited that with all the pillars, sort of like all the sort of like gunfire and then chunks flying out of these pillars. It's a real spectacle.
And what did you take that building to be? Because there's lots of shots that show the guns are shooting up fossils, and there's a big a diagram of an evolutionary
the tree of life. Yeah.
So this is some sort of museum, a natural science museum that's fallen to ruin.
That's a really good point, because I never really clocked what it was or really thought about it, because you look at the surface layer of all the action so much, like all the time when that scene is going on. But you're right.
It's a
does seem
very
to be a
deliberate
museum.
choice.
Yeah.
For the things on the walls to be fossils of old species and shooting up the evolutionary tree. When we're talking about a film that's all about the possible next step of human evolution, to be having that kind of visual action going on.
Yeah, and that links on directly to what happens afterwards. So after this sort of scene, after this like shooting up the tree of life in the background, which is this sort of big sort of, what would you call it? A mural? It's not a mural, is it?
I think
It's
we'll just quickly look it up. So it's a Darwinian concept to illustrate evolution. I don't know how literal it's meant to be, or if it's more just a sort of way of the thinking of Darwinian evolution.
Because then after that, the Puppet Master is having that chat with Kusanagi. And during that chat, he says, the only reason I'm sort of like not human or can't ever be sort of like considered to be human is because I can't reproduce.
And who does that remind you of? It's our old friend Proteus from Demon Seed, who just wanted to reproduce biologically.
Of course, yeah, it's exactly like that.
So we go back to something that we've seen in a few AI films, which is the idea of AI getting so far and then just missing out on one essential thing, and that essential thing has been different in a few of the films we've seen. And for the Puppet Master, it's biological. Maybe not biological in the end, but a sense of procreation.
He wants to carry on his sort of programming and sort of create something new, because he does the direct comparison between that and DNA.
Yeah.
So DNA is just a series of programs, and then we pass on our DNA,
But for him, dying and destruction and change is also a crucial part of that, because he's explicitly against the idea of producing a load of copies of himself. That's not reproduction. He wants to mix his DNA or whatever he's got with another being and create a new thing.
Yeah, to change and grow and become something else.
And to die.
Yeah, and to die, which is sort of like, that's not what you would usually imagine that an AI would want. Like, so with Hal, he didn't want to die at all, but that's because he can't, there's nothing to carry on his legacy.
Yeah.
Whereas the Puppet Master is saying, if I can have sort of like an offspring to carry on the legacy and then sort of carry that forward, then that's me sort of like continuing life and continue to grow and evolve.
Yeah.
And the way he does that is by potentially, saying to Kusanagi, what if we merge and become this new thing?
And what's his kind of... he's gone about that in an interesting way, because Kusanagi ultimately... The end of the film is that she decides, yes, she'll do that. She's a bit hesitant. Batu's definitely worried about what she's doing. There is we know that she's had these existential thoughts, so it's kind of, she's open to this kind of a decision, let's say. But the Puppet Master's stalked her a little bit,
Yeah.
And I think by the end of the film, or by about halfway through the film, you start to become very sympathetic to the Puppet Master. When he reveals himself, he requests asylum, he says he's a sentient being, it suddenly like flips the whole story on its head, and you're suddenly a lot more sympathetic. And now we're on a bit of a rescue mission to save the Puppet Master. And then they kind of join forces in the end. But he's also ghost hacked people, which is a really horrifying, cruel thing to do. He's committed acts of cyber terrorism, but that might have been when he was not a sentient program. But certainly in the run up to get into Section 9, he has done some quite unpleasant things to get there. And he has manipulated Kusanagi a little bit in terms of stalking her, figuring out that she's the person who will be susceptible to this, beaming that thought into her head when she's having an existential crisis. On the one hand, you could say he was reaching out to a kindred spirit. On the other hand, you could say he's stalking this woman and he's isolated her at a particularly, pivotal moment in her mindset.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because I didn't really think of it like that.
And I'm not saying I don't really come down on either side of that fence, but he's a morally ambiguous character. I think.
Yeah, because like towards the end of the film, they kind of like paint him more as a victim.
Yeah,
like he's a sentient life form. He's just trying to get out. He's just trying to escape.
Yeah,
like pass on his genes, whatever. Yeah, it's really quite complex, that whole idea.
I mean, that's what makes it such a good film.
Yeah,
like there is no right answer on that, I don't think. But I mean, broadly speaking, yeah, he is a victim. Yeah, I think I sort of might fall down on the side of having sympathy towards him, but his actions are not good.
Yeah, and then sort of like going along the evolution thing and passing on genes and reproducing. So essentially, Kusanagi and the Puppet Master both die, and then what transpires is Bato takes Kusanagi's head and then puts it on a child body that he got from the black market.
Super weird.
Yeah, super weird.
It just breezes past that.
Yeah.
Batu's like, I just got a little girl's body off the black market. Anyway, good to see you.
Yeah, but that fits though, because it is like the new child, the new birth.
Sure. And she talks in a creepy child's voice, but thankfully just for like
just for the first bit, and then it switches round. And then you find out that they have merged, they've become this new creature, this new creation, and then you sort of don't know what's going to happen after that.
What do you see that as? What do you, is that a new species that's been created?
Well, it depends. We never really know what Kusanagi is.
Sure, that's true.
So it's kind of, so it's assuming that she was human at least at some point, and she's always been like a human brain. Then yes, the merging of AI and humanity. So it's like the synchronization thing again, where they become one.
I was trying to think in my head like how this lines up with post-humanism or transhumanism. I don't know which is the right term, but so you could argue that at the end of the film, Kusanagi and the Puppet Master have combined to become this post-human thing. But also, I think Kusanagi kind of already was post-human. She's
Yeah.
almost entirely cybernetic, and she's even unsure about the one thing that would define her as still human, which is her ghost. So that kind of puts her in a bit of a post-human mode already. So then combining with something else felt a bit like the birth of a new species in that Darwinian evolutionary way, where two creatures with certain traits have to come together and have reproduced together to create a new thing. And that's your new species that's just been born, possibly.
Yeah, no, that would make sense. And obviously, like, birthing and is like such a thing throughout the film. It starts off with the birth of Kusanagi's body coming out of that sort of like water, and it is like a birth. And then she's obsessed with swimming. She likes to be sort of like, even though Bateau says that she's got a cybernetic body and she could sink.
To the bottom,
yeah, if the jetpack doesn't work, whatever it is she's got under the water. But yeah, it's all leading up to this birth and this sort of like amalgamation of these two, like, of AI and humanity, basically.
And will he be part of you forever?
Bateau, remember the words I spoke in another voice on the boat that night? I understand it now, and there are even more words that go with the passage. These words are, when I was a child, my speech, feelings, and thinking were all those of a child. Now that I am a man, I have no more use for childish ways. And now I can say these things without help in my own voice. Because I am now neither the woman who was known as the Major, nor am I the program called the Puppet Master.
Have you seen the American live-action remake?
No, it's on Netflix. I was gonna watch it.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
I have seen it.
Go on.
First off, what do you think about, because obviously it's very problematic with the casting of Scarlett Johansson.
Where is it set? Is it set in America?
I think
Have they moved it?
I can't
over?
remember. I'm pretty sure Hong Kong
Okay,
is where it's
right. Okay.
I'm just going to say Hong
like,
Kong.
are all the other characters Asian?
Some of them are, from what I remember.
that's
But yeah,
pretty
I know it
mad.
was very,
Yeah.
because
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
it's Kusanagi is the name of her character. Yeah, it's played by, it's
Right,
the
right,
whole
right.
whitewashing
Yeah, yeah.
America kind of thing.
No, I didn't know all of that. I thought they might have just moved it all over to the US and maybe renamed her, and
Yeah, I
but
think
it's actually still she's playing.
I think,
an Asian
yeah,
character.
yeah, which is the problematic thing. But interesting in that they go into a bit more about what Kusanagi's background is.
Okay.
Now, I don't know how much this refers back to the mangas and later on, but they go down this whole route of, so again, she meets the puppet master, but she also goes back into why she had her body changed and stuff, and apparently she was a protester against something that this company were doing, and they took her brain and put it into one of these cybernetic bodies.
Okay.
And then it's sort of like her, and she visits like her mum from her previous life and that kind of thing. And her mum
Do you
doesn't
see
realise.
her before?
Yeah, you see what she used to look like.
Is it Scarlett Johansson?
No,
Right. Okay.
it's an Asian lady.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, so it's like, so she's seeing that's what
Oh
she used to
dear.
be before,
Yeah,
and then she was transferred into this
That is a weird
Scarlett
choice,
Johansson
isn't
body.
it?
Yeah, and then it's less about AI per se in that, and more about what if somebody takes your consciousness and steals it, and like the whole ghost hacking thing becomes more prominent in that.
Okay. Is it still about? Is the basic plot still the same? Is it about the puppet master?
Yeah, the basic plot is she's after the puppet master, but yeah, that has this whole other layer about her background.
Is it any good?
It's all right. I much prefer this, but yeah, it's all right.
There's a sequel
quite-
to Ghost in the Shell, an
Yeah.
animated sequel, Ghost in the Shell 2. I haven't seen
Innocence.
it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's supposedly like one of the best animated films, as in the animation itself is supposed to be phenomenal in the second film. I don't know if it's any good as a film, but I have heard it's a gorgeous looking film.
Okay, that's good to know.
The anime is supposed to be quite good. I know people who have watched
Standalone
it.
complex.
Yeah, that's supposed
Yep.
to be
So
good.
there's an anime series. There's obviously the sequels, and again, it's this kind of like branching out franchise.
Yeah.
Which is something the Matrix does as well. So the Matrix has all these different sequels and like games and that kind of thing that have been spawned from it.
What is happening to me?
The answer is out there, Neo. It's the question that drives us.
What is the Matrix?
No one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
shall we move on to The Matrix?
Yes.
Okay, so I know you really enjoyed it because you sent me a text saying that was fucking great or something like that after you'd watched it.
Yeah. I don't like to text you when I'm watching the movies that we're going to talk about because I don't want to say all the things that I then want to say on the podcast.
Yeah.
But I was really pumped up and I'd had a bit to drink, so I got really excited and just wanted to have a great time. And I was having a great time.
I haven't watched it in so long.
I haven't watched it in so long, but well, what's your memory of this film? Because again, it's 1999. We're 11, 12, and then I didn't see it till DVD, so a bit older.
So my mate Victor introduced it to me first. He had it on VHS.
Nice.
And I remember he brought it around one day and was like, we have to watch this. Like, we have to watch this film. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
We'll just watch it. Afterwards, I was doing like kung fu moves around the front room. Just like, what the hell have I just watched? It was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you forget how good it is as well.
Oh, yeah. I thought it was going to be rubbish.
Yeah.
Or I was worried that it might be rubbish. This was the first DVD that we owned in our house.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Before we had a like standalone DVD player, which meant watching it on the computer in like my dad's home office. But despite that, watching it this week, I realized that I have seen this film dozens and dozens of times. It's like etched into my brain, and I would have just been hitting puberty, so like physiologically I might have been like, my brain was physically developing and I'm watching this bloody movie like 2 times a week probably.
Just going to retain all of that information.
And it's like, it was so nostalgic. It was there's been a big gap. I did watch it so many times, and yeah, I think we might have watched it at university,
quite possibly. Yeah,
but I was just fell asleep in those screens. But there had been a big gap. I hadn't seen it in a very long time. But everything, just lines. I know it's like you're a massive Wu-Tang fan, aren't you? So when you put on that first album, I know that particularly the first album, that was like a big deal for you when you were a teenager, wasn't it?
Chambers, fantastic.
Yeah. So when you put, for me, that album, well, there's a lot of them, but like one of them is Favorite Noise by Real Big Fish.
Yeah.
Just aged like milk. I mean, but like
aged like milk.
Absolutely love it. And I put it on, and it's like every beat of it. You know when like one track ends and you can like just feel in your bones the milliseconds before the first beat of the next song, Yeah. That's what it's like watching The Matrix. It's musical cues that I couldn't even hum. I couldn't like hum these musical cues, but as soon as I hear them, I know what the rhythms of the dialogue are going to be. I know exactly how Morpheus sounds. There's stuff like when he's offering the red and the blue pill, and welcome to the real world. Little lines like that in particular are on the DVD menus. So when you go into different menus, they'll play like a 2-second clip of the film. So it's even more so, those scenes are even more etched into my brain because I saw them even more than the actual film itself.
Classic. And I mean, the pacing, I forgot how good the pacing is in that film.
Yeah, it's over 2 hours long. It's a long movie.
So I looked at the runtime and I was like, oh, is it 2 hours? I don't remember it being 2 hours. So I went in thinking there was going to be a few moments when I was like, oh, I've seen this before, I'm going to lose interest. But every single scene propels the action and the narrative further along. There's not a dull moment in it. You don't spend any time going, oh, I'm not that bothered. It is very well paced.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's so iconic as well. It starts with the phone call between Sci-Fi and Trinity, but you don't see anything. You're just seeing the numbers on the screen. But even, the font, the way the numbers look, absolutely iconic. That it looks like the Matrix code that we're going to see later and is a huge part of it, but it's just numbers.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal for a culturally significant film, is if fonts and lettering are then forever associated with that film.
Yeah.
You know that's a big hit.
And that's sort of come from Ghost in the Shell as well. Because the Ghost in the Shell sort of like comparisons are ripe in this film. I know the Wachowskis took so much inspiration. Basically, I think what they did when they pitched it to the studios is they said, we want to make a live action something like this. This is what we want to do. We want to turn this into a real film. And that's what they did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really well.
Yeah. And so much so that I think they got comic book artists to do all of the storyboarding.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
Yeah, just to make it more impactful. So, because obviously trying to describe the Matrix to someone, the way it looks, trying to pitch that to someone must have been such a task.
Yeah.
But putting it in a comic book sort of like sense, you can see it more. You need the visuals for the Matrix, I think, in order to.
That's a hell of a move. Like you need good storyboards, and you can look at, like, if you do look at DVD extras. I don't do that anymore, but did when I was younger a lot. You do sometimes see storyboards, and they're always, I think, much higher quality than I was expecting. Like the detail of drawings in them, because I've done storyboards myself, and it's stick figures.
Stick man,
just pointless, really. But you can, when you see those detailed ones, you see the value of a storyboard in being one of those early steps of bringing the visuals to life. So getting professional comic book artists in, not to diminish the work of professional storyboard artists, but it is a level above in terms of the work that
it's a
would have
certain
gone into
style as well, isn't it? It comes down to that.
Yeah.
It's
cool.
And what the Wachowskis, before they'd done this film, they'd done one screenplay, which was Assassins, which starred Sylvester Stallone. Have you ever seen it?
Nope.
I recommend you watch it. I think I mentioned it before when we were talking about Terminator, but it's a lot of fun.
Okay.
So they did the screenplay for that, and they'd done Bound. Have you ever seen Bound?
Nope.
It's sort of like I think from what I remember, it's like a heist kind of thing, and there's two girls, and they're sort of like trying to get one over on the mob or something like that. But that's another good one, and stylistically, it looks like The Matrix. You can tell it's the Wachowskis.
Okay.
Lots of sort of like over the top shots and that kind of thing. So they come off the bat of doing these two things, and then they come up with this it's a really ambitious film.
It's very ambitious. It's very high concept. There's a lot of plot to get through, or not even so much plot. It's universe building, and that's key to making this film work. And as a comparison to Ghost in the Shell, it's interesting that The Matrix does do it better, because, I watched these films at roughly the same age, really did not remember the plot of Ghost in the Shell very well, but I know the plot of The Matrix. It's a simple enough plot, and is it? I think it is a simple enough plot. So the storyline of the film is incredibly
the themes
concept.
and the philosophical aspects of it, which are a bit more heavy duty,
and the complexity of the world building that has to go into just getting you into the world and making you understand the relatively simple story.
Yeah, it's a more exciting idea and concept, really, when it comes down to it. Because Ghost in the Shell is fantastic, but The Matrix just has that bit more that kind of like gets you into that world. And again, it's the world building. It's
world building, and it's a quality of storytelling. And I think that comes from the fact that this is an original movie story, rather than taking however many dozens of issues of a complex manga story and squishing it down to a really short movie. We didn't mention it, but Ghost in the Shell's under 90 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's like an hour and 20 or something.
Yeah.
It might even be shorter than that.
Which I was surprised by when I put it on, because I remember it being so complex and dense. I assumed it was going to be like 2.5 hour movie, but it's just bashes through a really quick storyline. Whereas The Matrix, a lot longer, but the pacing's incredibly smooth, and it just takes you through the story really neatly.
So I think The Matrix takes a lot of stylistic inspiration from Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Sort of like with the plugs in the back of the head, the phone itself, sort of like using the phone calls.
Some of those technological stuff is very Ghost in the Shell-y, but the set design is very, very different.
Yeah.
So the city in Ghost in the Shell, they're both very realistic cities, but Ghost in the Shell is really colourful and lively and exciting, whereas The Matrix, inside The Matrix, the world of that is it's sort of a dull green. Everything's so muted and just kind of deliberately boring looking.
Yeah, because they tint both the worlds, don't they? So like it's dull green inside The Matrix, and it's kind of like blue tint outside of it, isn't there? It's sort of like, they've kind of got that.
That was interesting. I don't know much about how they went about doing that, because this film, this came out before Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, which gets lots of writing done about the colour palette, the digital colour palette they use in that, which kind of shaped a lot of what films looked like for a long time after Oh Brother, Where Art Thou.
Yeah.
But I assume The Matrix I would have thought they were using the same technology to change that color palette. But
I think they sucked out certain colors on different
Yeah.
shots and different scenes in order to sort of like give it that impact and that like to stylize it more.
yeah, but it doesn't quite get the credit for that Oh Brother Where Art Thou does for the influence on how films are colored.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it is sort of like, but I think that's partly due to with this film, you're so involved in what's going on the whole time.
Sure.
Sometimes you kind of, and because it's so well put together, you kind of gloss over stuff like that a little bit.
Yeah.
You take it for granted.
Yes. Yeah. And it's more when you're watching it for our purposes, coming here to talk about it. I was really like picking this stuff apart in my head.
So plot-wise, how would you describe the plot? Now, I am really bad at describing any sort of plots. It's
Everyone's
simple
seen
enough,
this movie,
isn't
right?
it? Yeah.
It's set in a world where there's been AI has been created, and then a long time later, there's a big war between the humans and the AI. It's very similar to Terminator. The machines win that war. They start to use humans as a power source.
They're like batteries, aren't they?
Yep. And to keep them compliant, and this is where maybe there's a little plot hole here, to keep them compliant in that they invent this virtual reality world that every human being is plugged into, and that is called the Matrix.
Yeah.
And it takes the form of 1999 human world.
Yeah.
Which actually that works quite well because it's the world shortly before the AIs were invented and everything started to go wrong. So that's kind of where they place it. Which kind of works because it was also released in 1999.
And you're sort of like, so they do all this exposition about sort of like, 20 minutes into the film?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Morpheus just explains this to Neo.
Just tells you everything you need to know.
And Morpheus is the leader of a ship of rebels who are trying to fight against these machines. The Nebuchadnezzar, who they go into the Matrix and sort of commit acts of terrorism, I guess, to try and liberate more human minds. That's the kind of general scene setting. Yeah. And then on top of that, you've got the storyline, which is the main character, Neo, is believed to be this prophesized religious figure who's going to free all of mankind.
So Neo, who is Thomas Anderson.
Right. Yeah.
And he's just like...
Mr. Anderson.
Yeah, Mr. Anderson. And he's just like an average Joe, like computer hacker. He feels like there's something wrong with his world.
Yep.
And he goes searching for answers basically on the net. And he's like your typical computer hacker. He reminded me of Matthew Broderick in
Really?
War Games a little bit, just sort of like obviously like a cooler version, a bit more dingy flat.
Yeah.
It's like Matthew Broderick a few years later.
Yeah, if his life
like his
doesn't go
life
so
hasn't
good,
gone
yeah.
great, and now he's just living in this grimy apartment.
Yeah.
And he's discovered the world is fake.
Yeah.
That would have been a whole different film.
Yeah. So Morpheus reaches out to him through Trinity,
Yeah.
who is also a member of his crew. They liberate Neo because they believe that he is the one, the chosen one, the savior of mankind. And then the rest of the plot of the movie is Neo finding out whether he is or he isn't the one. His training in manipulating the Matrix, and then the capture and rescue of Morpheus.
Yeah.
Is the kind of final set piece. That's kind of how it ends.
Yeah, that's sort of like the third act, isn't it? Where that whole bit when he's sort of discovering that he has these powers,
Yeah.
and it's all building up to that bit. So throughout the film, there's the whole sort of idea of what is real and what isn't real.
Yeah.
And they play with that concept throughout, and like, is it a dream? Is it reality? Is it the Matrix? What if what you know is completely wrong? And that is such an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
And the idea that we're all in this virtual reality world controlled by artificial intelligence is like, it's a really strong like sci-fi idea.
That single concept of what the Matrix is I think the main reason that this film is so successful, so well remembered after 20 years, James. My God, it's been 20 years. But I think that concept is amazing. And the thing that it really reminded me of was The Truman Show.
Yeah.
It's two
got a lot of
great
parallels.
two great movies that are centered around a really good, well thought out concept that sticks with you and gets inside your head a little bit. I think Inception is that for some people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Inception's that great of a movie, but
It's got a lot more. Yeah, it's a lot more complicated with Inception.
Yeah.
I think that kind of trips it up a little bit.
Yeah, but it's such a simple idea. The Truman Show more so, incredibly simple idea.
Yeah.
Everyone's watching me, and then you leave from having seen that film and you're convinced that everyone's watching you.
Yeah.
The Matrix, the simple idea is, it's a bit more complex, but the idea is that the world around you is not real. It's a simulation created to keep you compliant. And if you do allow that into your brain, that can really mess you up.
Yeah. And it's this whole thing about not breaking the rules and being compliant,
Yeah.
which is such a core piece of the film.
Yeah.
It's like there's that amazing scene when Neo is talking to his boss and he says, "Oh, you're a bit of a rule breaker. You need to if you want to, you need to be arriving on time. You need to do this. You need to do that." And there's rules that they establish later on. If you see an agent, you run.
Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that, and you can't do this in the Matrix.
And Morpheus talks to him about the rules of the programming. You just need to learn that some of those rules can be bent and some of them can be broken. And that's that you see it on Neo's face when they're having that fight. The realization that it's not about physical strength or ability. It's more about the power of the mind, which I think is I do want to say, I think that Keanu Reeves' performance in this film is good, and he has had a lot of shit over his career as not being the world's best actor, maybe. Or certainly like when this film came out.
Yeah.
Because he's playing there's a bit of detachment to it, I guess, and it's not the most emotional performance.
I think that's part of it. He's
it is part
questioning
of it.
everything.
Yeah.
And I
think he's great. I love him.
But I know there's something, because if you look at the scripting of it, he doesn't say more than like 2 sentences throughout the film until the very end when he does his monologue.
Yeah.
And it's all sort of, I know people have done like supercuts of him just saying words.
Okay.
Like AI, agent, what?
You mean artificial intelligence?
Yeah. It's stuff like that. And it's just like he's saying all these one words throughout the film. But it's through him that we're exploring the world, and we're sort of finding out all these things about what reality is and what's really happened.
I think he's a good actor. I don't think this is his absolute best performance because he's done other better things.
Yeah.
He's incredible in John Wick. He's incredible in the Bill and Ted films.
Fantastic. And the new one's coming out soon as well.
A new Bill and Ted film?
I think they've just finished filming it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's a new Bill and Ted.
I feel like I read about that once a year for the last 10 years, that there might be a new Bill and Ted.
I've been following it on Twitter. They've got like if you're into Bill and Ted, you should check out the Bill and Ted Twitter that they've got. And yes, it's the original actors. It's sort of like them as older men. Why haven't they made it? Why haven't they done this yet? And it's sort of like, it looks like it's going to be great.
Fixed the world with their music as well.
I don't think, I can't wait for that. But going back to the casting of this, so other people which were up for the role, I know Will Smith has famously said that he turned down the role of Neo because he didn't feel mature enough at the time. And he went and did Wild Wild West instead. I can't picture Will Smith as Neo.
I can't. I mean, he would have played it completely differently. He wouldn't have been that stoic, quiet guy, somewhat monosyllabic that Keanu Reeves plays it.
Like older Will Smith, I reckon could have done it. Like now, now he's done more serious roles. But at that time, he'd just come off like doing Men in Black and things like that.
Right. Okay.
I can't picture him at that time. And
no, that is fair enough. He was still like a big comedy star, wasn't he? Yeah.
And Nicolas Cage.
Too old, right?
Yeah,
oh no, I guess.
But Nicolas Cage was apparently he turned it down as well.
Yeah.
But Keanu.
The thing is, both of them are like opposite ends of the spectrum.
Yeah.
Like, especially at that time. I mean, Will Smith has done more serious, toned down roles, but at that time, 1999, I can't imagine either Nick Cage or Will Smith doing that muted performance that Keanu Reeves does. They're big personalities.
Yeah, they would have been too big for the film, I feel, and then it would have taken it, because you want to believe that at the start of the film, Keanu Reeves' character is just like an average Joe. He can't do anything. He's never going to be he's never going to be the one.
Yeah.
He hasn't got that in him. And then by the end, he's completely transformed.
All of that stuff, I think it's worth noting, feeds into the way this film is just ultimate nerd fantasy.
ultimate nerd fantasy, definitely.
He is that he is a bit of a nobody. He spends all of his time at home on his computer. He's physically weak, but mentally strong. So in this world where you can just inject the power of jujitsu into your brain, he suddenly becomes physically strong. It really plays into that
He's
kind
like,
of
the
fantasy.
archetype of the reluctant hero as well, isn't he? He's like, oh, it can't be me. It's not me. He's like realistic about it.
Modest, overly modest.
Yeah. Like, oh, not me, not me.
Oh, heavens, no.
Oh, wait. Okay, sure. I'll be the one.
Yeah.
Jiu-jitsu. I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu. Holy shit. Hey, Mikey, I think he likes it. How about some more? Hell yes. Hell yeah.
So in terms of like setting up a world where everything might be a dream, the opening sequence has dreamlike qualities. It is because so much happens in that sequence where Trinity is captured by the police that the first time you see it, without understanding who Trinity is, what she's able to do in the Matrix, it's mad. You know, she's capable of doing all these like superhero kung fu moves and jumping over a massive jump.
Yeah,
and then
a tiny window as well. She goes across.
Yeah, like Superman. And then the agents show up and it takes on this weird nightmarish quality. And then specifically the end of that sequence feels very dreamlike to me, which is where she runs for a phone and, you know, without all the context of knowing what happens in the film, you know, why she's trying to escape all these people, why she's so interested in a ringing phone. A massive truck screeches to a halt, you know, which is, you know, presumably got nothing to do with her. Why do they even know who she is? And an agent gets out. So these agents are everywhere. It's like a horrible nightmare. She's for some reason got to answer a phone. That kind of dream logic of like, I have to do something. I have to get to that place, even though it wouldn't make any sense. Even though picking up a phone is going to get a truck running into me. And then she does it, and then she's gone, and that's the end of the scene. And we don't get any explanation of how she was able to do the things she did, what these weird uniformed agents are, and why she just disappears from answering a phone and being hit by a truck.
Yeah, and it's that dream logic at the beginning which is so interesting, keeps you really involved. So like Neo's just in his office. He gets this phone. He's told he needs to go onto like the roof, onto the scaffolding bit, wherever it is. He's suddenly in a interrogation room and his mouth closes.
Yeah.
And it's all like, it's just shut. And you have no idea why this has happened. He's given this weird sort of computer bug or whatever it is into his chest for his belly button, which is really gross.
Really gross. No need for the tracker that these simulated agents insert into him. It doesn't need to look like the creatures from the real world, the squiddies that we see later. But yeah, there's lots of good. That's one of the first moments of like real body horror in this film. His mouth closing over is horrible. The bug that goes inside his belly button. What else do we have? When he gets into the real world, when it's all the plugs going into your body, that's quite horrific, especially when he first wakes up. Every time an agent takes someone over, which was very similar to ghost hacking in Ghost in the Shell, in that once an agent can take you over at any time, and once they've done that, you're gone, you're dead. Not quite as bad as having to live with the horror of it as you do in Ghost in the Shell, but it's still, they just take over. It's always a bit unpleasant and glitchy. You know, there's that one scene where the agents, you see the agent's hand coming through a human hand, but it doesn't just like match up with it. It's like the fingers grow out of the wrist.
Yeah, it's really freaky.
It's just a really unpleasant way of showing that. It's not even smoothly taking over the body. It's like ripping through their body.
So the agents are the main AI in this film, aren't they?
Yeah. So what I thought was interesting was that there's two distinct AI characters in this film. And it seems like one at the start. And they are, the face of that AI is the agents.
Yeah.
And they seem like a uniform AI entity, and we learn more about that they're just the sort of physical manifestation of the much bigger concept of the machines. But as the plot develops, Agent Smith is completely distinct from the other agents. I don't think the other two agents ever take off their glasses.
Yeah, they don't. I'm pretty sure they don't.
And that's a big deal for Agent Smith, but also just everything he does. He disconnects himself. I love that as a concept. They've got these earpieces, and it's a bit silly because they are computer programs, and if they need information sent to them, presumably they can just do that. But it's a physical representation of him deciding to cut himself off from that information supply. So he moves away as distinct.
He becomes more of an individual as well. You kind of forget the other two in the background. You don't ever get their names, do you? It's just Agent Smith, I think.
One of them's called Jones, but I don't know. I think you would only get that from like the credits.
Yeah.
I don't know if they introduce himself.
But yeah, so Agent Smith is like, even though they're like, there's 3 different agents, they're all different. They're not. They could have easily just all been the same person, but they're distinct program differences.
Do you think so?
Well, they look different, don't they?
They look different in terms of their behaviour, though. Smith is the only one that breaks free. That's the thing. I think the other two remain locked in unison.
Yeah,
and they are still just 2 slightly different looking physical manifestations of the machines. They're still towing the company line, basically. Smith is the one that becomes a distinct character, and it's really interesting how we see that. And again, we talked about what makes the AI unique. What's their one little thing that's like a human that makes them like a human, and it's real hatred.
Yeah,
Smith, like it's racist. Some of the language that he uses.
He says he hates the smell of like the Matrix because there's all this humanity in there, and he says hate a lot, doesn't he? It feels like it's intense, isn't it?
This place.
And he wants to find Zion, which is the last human city. He wants to be able to find the code so they can just get rid of them all.
Kill all the rebels.
Yeah, and then he can get out the Matrix and just...
So what's interesting about that is that's what all the machines want, but Smith is the only one who wants it because he hates being in the Matrix as much as Morpheus hates everyone hates the Matrix.
Yeah.
You know, he hates the Matrix, Morpheus hates the Matrix. They all want out of the Matrix. It's not really made clear what being out of the Matrix means for Smith. I think they might go into that in the sequels, but he's a computer program, and I always sort of understood it as we have machines outside as well, but I would have thought the agents were special programs created that only exist in the Matrix, but obviously not. There is life outside the Matrix for Smith, unless he just hates it so much he would rather not exist. So getting out of the Matrix for him is just unplug the program. I hate it so much, which would be great. That'd be a great concept for that character. But
so Agent Smith is the only one who's showing emotion as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like you don't see emotion from any of the others. And do you think that emotion is what leads to his downfall? Because he's the one who says like, I hate humanity.
Yeah.
And we've seen in other films AI having problems with humanity.
Yeah.
And that kind of thing, like Skynet.
Looking down on humanity.
Yeah.
Roy Batty.
Yeah.
Smith has a lot of similarities to Roy Batty. But I was thinking about that a lot because what was interesting was I think there's a difference between anger and hatred. Roy Batty felt anger at the injustice of his situation, and he directed that anger at the humans that created him. Smith just independently hates humans. He has a problem with humans. He finds them disgusting. And that's a very subtle but different route to take with that character. So he has a lot in common with Roy Batty, but it is a distinctly different emotion, I think, that he's feeling. Do you think that is a weakness for him?
That he's feeling emotion?
Yeah.
I think
it's certainly it's a chink in the armor of the machines, as seen by he disconnects himself. He doesn't know that Neo and Trinity are in the building because he's more interested in having this passionate, angry conversation with Morpheus. But does it play into any kind of downfall for him?
Well, he's the only one that, in terms of the first film, gets destroyed. He's the only one who's like properly like obliterated when Neo jumps inside him. Sounds dodgy. And then just splits him apart.
Yeah, and then flexes.
Yeah, again, sounds really dodgy.
Yeah.
So he's the only one, whereas the others, they take one look at that happening and they run away.
Yeah.
But is it, and then he's the one who's fighting Neo as well.
Yeah, also, actually, now that I think about it, he explicitly says to Neo when they capture him and put the bug in him, he says, "My colleagues think that I'm wasting my time, but I still think that you can do the right thing and lead us to Morpheus." So presumably what that's alluding to is that they know that Morpheus is trying to find this prophesized person, don't know how seriously the machines take that prophecy, but they could have killed Neo. They had Neo, they could have killed him. If he was a prophesized religious leader, then they've stopped that. If they don't believe that, they've at least dented the morale of the people who do believe he was a prophesized leader. So they could have just killed him. But it seems to be Smith leading the charge of, nope, I want to keep him alive, talk to him, use him as a tracker to Morpheus.
It's interesting that, isn't it? Because
and he's doing that, isn't he? Because from their point of view, capturing Morpheus is job one, because get the codes to Zion, kill all the rebels, Smith gets to leave the Matrix. So yeah, you're right. Yeah, I think it does lead to his downfall, because he's had the chance to kill Neo straight off the bat, get rid of him. They don't do that. It all unravels.
Yeah, if he was just like running his programming, then that's what you would have done. That's the...
Yeah, but it would have meant him spending longer in the Matrix.
Yeah, which he didn't want to do.
He did not want that.
He did not want that.
Can you hear me, Morpheus? I'm going to be honest with you. I hate this place. This zoo, this prison, this reality, whatever you want to call it. I can't stand it any longer. It's the smell, if there is such a thing. I feel saturated by it. I can taste your stink. And every time I do, I fear that I've somehow been infected by it. It's repulsive, isn't it?
Let's talk about the religious elements of this film. And I feel like I need you to lead the charge on this. It's very overt in this film. I think
it's just.
I always miss these things.
I didn't pick up too much extra than sort of like the blatant stuff.
Yeah.
So it's very. I don't know too much about. No, well, let's start again. So basically, there's lots of Christ comparisons. He comes back from the dead. There's a Judas character.
Yeah.
Sci-Fi is basically the Judas character in this, and
he has his disciples, I guess.
He's got his disciples. Yeah. There's lots of sort of like blatant things like that. I think there is a bit more to it than just direct Christ comparisons, though. I think there are elements of other religions in there.
Yeah, and the sense of building a religion in a future sci-fi world where you need a messiah figure to come along. And if I can just bring it all back around to the thing I always talk about, which is Dune. It's similar to that, where you have this constructed mythology before the character even comes into it. And that takes the form of prophecy. In Dune, that is a bit more acknowledged as a construct, whereas in The Matrix, it's this more organic. It's a prophecy. We really believe in this.
Yeah, and it's prophecy, yet Neo doesn't believe in fate. He thinks that's gonna, like, he thinks if there's fate, then he has no.
He has no self-determination.
He has no self-determination. He can't decide what he wants to do if it's all preordained.
And yet he comes around to it.
Yeah, he figures it out, doesn't he? He's kind of like...
Yeah. I guess the film lands on a side of pro-religion where these prophesized events can come true and be a real thing, because that is what happens with Neo. Unless you just believe that with the right kind of person who understands being able to break the rules of the Matrix, is that all it takes? And maybe the nudge of believing a little bit in prophecy yourself to give you the confidence to bend and break those rules of the Matrix.
And it's all about like how he views himself, his sense of identity, and how that changes throughout the film. Because he starts off when he's in his work clothes. They're sort of, they don't fit very well. They're all sort of loose fitting. And then when he goes into the Matrix the first time, he's wearing just like a black suit, whereas everyone else is quite sort of like, they've got their sunglasses on.
Oh yeah,
they're super cool 90s like long black jackets, PVC. Like, yeah, cool and sexy. And he's just got this black suit on. And then by the end of it, in the sort of like the third act, when he's there in that epic scene with all the guns in the foyer area, he's got like this long jacket on, he's got his shades on, he's got these gun holsters. His sort of like idea of himself's completely changed. And Morpheus sort of like sets that up earlier in the film, where he says, you appear in the Matrix however you imagine yourself to be, basically.
Residual self-image.
Yeah, residual self-image. Whereas in the real world, he's sort of like, he's got no hair, he's got like a big plug in his head, he's got all these sort of like ports all over his body from when he was part of the harvest in the fields. So it's interesting, this idea of self-image and how his changes so much throughout the film until he views himself as the one, as this sort of like all-powerful like person. And then
so that there is that element of a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is you could take the reading of the film to just be that a hero was prophesized and that prophecy delivered, or you could just take it as having a prophecy in place is enough to convince an individual of their own abilities in this world where you can manipulate the Matrix and achieve amazing things. That maybe that's all it took. Because I guess the big thing that is making a case for him being solely unique in a messianic way is that he gets shot dead by Smith.
Yeah, he comes back to life. He's resurrected.
He has a resurrection. But if you look at that the other way, and that's for all intents and purposes, and the other characters see that as confirmation, he is the one. He has superhuman abilities, because when you die in the Matrix, you die in real life. That's been established. But again, that's just a rule of the programming, right? We've been told that, and these rules can be bent and broken. So maybe all it needed was Neo to have the confidence in himself and believe in this prophecy a little bit to actually just say, no, I just reject the messages that are going to my brain from this computer program telling me that the bullets have killed me. And I just won't allow that, and I'll continue to work within the program.
Exactly. It's that rule-breaking element of the film. And it was did you notice, like, I like how the set pieces are all very stylized, like I know we mentioned earlier. There's lots of rain sequences, and the rain matches up with the sort of like the code, so that the code looks like the rain.
Nice.
And do you remember the bit in The Office, which I spoke about earlier? There's a window washer.
Yeah.
And the suds look like the code as
Do
well.
they?
Yeah.
I missed that. I wondered why the shots dwelled on
Yeah, there's lots of things.
suds.
So he's already seeing the code.
I
He's
see.
understanding the world before he...
And his computer it's green text, which wouldn't be correct. That's anachronistic for a 1999 computer, but it looks like the Matrix code.
Yeah.
And it's beamed onto his face again, which doesn't happen from a computer screen. There's a nice shot where he's asleep, and the text from the computer screen is like seemingly reflected on his face, but that must have been shot with a projector. That's not a reflection, that's a projector. So they wanted to obviously show this sort of green text imprinted on his face. Yeah, you're right, because he's seeing it everywhere.
Yeah, and that sort of like leads into the whole sort of like him realizing himself and what he can do.
Yeah.
How did you do that?
Do what?
You moved like they do. I've never seen anyone move that fast.
Wasn't fast enough.
There's lots and lots of mirrors and reflective surfaces throughout the film. It's a really big thing. At first, I was reading a lot into how the agents have sunglasses, and we've talked about robots and being able to see their eyes and stuff. But then, obviously, all of the hero characters wear sunglasses in the Matrix. And Morpheus, when we first meet him, we don't see his eyes for ages, do we? We see Neo reflected in his eyes.
Do we see? Is it when he's in the real world that we first see his eyes? I can't remember.
I would think so. I don't think he
that
takes
would
off
match
the
up.
sunglasses.
Yeah.
and lots is done with these reflective surfaces, and it's all very, very stylized, because there's scenes where it looks like, this is great blocking, great camera positioning, we're seeing Neo reflected, and then there's other shots where it's like, no, that's a special effect, because we're looking dead on into Morpheus's eyes, and you see, for example, there's a great shot of the red pill in one hand and the blue pill in the other hand in each eye, and Neo reflected in both. And that's CGI. That has to be, because it's too complex of a shot to just construct. And that happens a lot. Happens later with the spoon. Obviously, they do a lot with the mirror when he's actually being removed from the Matrix.
Yeah.
It was very surreal. It reminded me of did you study melodrama at uni, the Douglas Sirk films? They talked a lot when we looked at that about frames around people and what that means, and also cracked mirror is a really slightly overdone metaphor for a cracked personality or a cracked mindset. But it was interesting that he's looking at that cracked reflection, and then it actually forms into a proper mirror, and his cracked reflection becomes a real reflection.
Yeah, and that matches up with him, how he's viewing himself.
He's waking up. He's about to wake up to the real world. And then it goes down a whole other mad route, which is the mirror becomes liquid and it takes over his whole body. But
so that reminded me of Lawnmower Man.
Oh yeah,
there's effects like that in that.
I love the scream as the liquid mirror is going down his throat, and it turns into like a modem noise.
It's a really good scene.
Yeah.
So I think we've got to talk about the special effects in this film and sort of like all the stunt work.
Yeah, it's amazing. But do you know what I found most weird about that? Bullet time is the thing in the Matrix. It was super famous at the time. It got a lot of press about it.
It's like 120 cameras in a circle or something, isn't it?
Yeah. So there's a lot of slow-mo in this film, but actual bullet time is that what you just described, where the shot appears to not only be in super slow motion, but the camera's also panning around like 270 degrees or something. Yeah. That's actual bullet time, and there's motion as well. So, for example, Trinity does her high kick at the start of the movie, and I don't think does the camera move around her?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, but I don't think she's moving.
She's like suspended.
She's suspended,
and then it goes. Into
but it's still impressive because it rotates around her. I don't think we then see proper bullet time until I looked at the timer. It was 1 hour and 45 in, which is on the rooftop when Neo
really famous moment. Yeah,
Neo leaning back, the bullets are going all over him, and then they do use quite a lot of it in that third act. But I was surprised by how little bullet time, I guess is what I'm saying. It was such a huge deal. It was really hyped up in the advertising and stuff. But
there's only 2 scenes with it. It'd be interesting to know exactly how many scenes are used it. I'm pretty sure there was only 2, wasn't there?
So if we say that they use it on Trinity at the start, that's 1. Neo bending over backwards, that's 2. I think that you see it again when Morpheus gets shot in the leg through the wall.
Yep.
And then you see it again definitely when Neo's fighting Agent Smith in the subway, and they're just missing each other. They're kind of spinning through the air, shooting their guns past each other's head. Those are the only ones that I kind of
that is a very good point. If they spent so much time on the marketing of the bullet time effect, and
well, I can understand why you might not. I mean, you don't want to use the same effect over and over again, and it's probably really expensive and difficult to do. But I was just surprised by how late it showed up in the movie. But I guess it's important for the plot of the movie, that's Neo doing like one of his first, I am the one, I can do incredible things.
It comes at a very pivotal time for his character.
Yeah.
And Trinity says, like, how can you move like them? I've never seen anyone move like them. So it's like, at that moment, you're like, oh, actually, he could be the one.
Yeah, and she's having the kind of realization, which is a bit weird because she's kind of on side with it the whole time. But she's still like, how did you do that?
Yeah.
Oh, Trinity, like you believe in it.
Come on now. But yeah, like the wire work and stuff that they were doing. Apparently they must have spent like 6 months or something like that in pre-production, just training with individual choreographers to try and get that all down.
Yeah. They all learnt kung fu for real, didn't they?
Yeah. I heard that Carrie-Anne Moss like twisted her ankle or something during the early stages, and she wouldn't tell anyone because she didn't want to lose her part. So she kind of kept it on the low. At least that's what I've heard. And in the making of documentary, they've got, so you see Keanu's got like a neck brace on.
Really?
So I was doing some research afterwards, and apparently he was suffering from, he'd just undergone surgery for 2-level fusion of the cervical spine, which had been slowly paralyzing his legs.
Jesus.
I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but either way, he had like a neck brace on during the making of.
Wow.
So he was obviously going, because certain people have gone like, oh, is that the reason his like movements are so stiff? But I think
I think that's a. Oh, I know. I always took.
Yeah,
that to
I think
be
that's
a
like
character choice.
Yeah, but yeah, no idea about that neck stuff. And
That's rough.
Running around on buildings and stuff and flipping off walls.
But do you know what? It's really cool.
It's really cool.
I have to say, I did think watching it this time, why do they all fight with Kung Fu?
Because Kung Fu's cool, man.
No, I know that. But are we ever given an in-universe explanation for why they engage in hand-to-hand combat with these agents?
It's just, not really.
Yeah.
But Kung Fu's just the thing. If you could fight in any style, which style would you want to fight in?
I learned jujitsu.
I love the whole idea of downloading all these skills as well is a brilliant idea.
Again, it's the nerd fantasy.
Yeah, like I'll just learn this, and then when Trinity goes like, I can't. No, what does Neo says? Oh, how are we going to drive this? How are we going to fly this helicopter?
Can you pilot a helicopter? Not yet.
Fantastic. Just there.
Again,
we go.
this is just all these lines in my head. I know exactly how they say it. It's just like mapped onto my brain.
So good.
Like I said, it's been a long time since I've seen this film, but I did watch it dozens and dozens of times. I've only seen the 2 sequels once each. Maybe, I think I might have seen the second one a couple of times. I quite liked it, but I haven't watched them since. Can you remember much of those?
Bits and pieces. I think I've seen them a couple of times. The thing that sticks in my mind the most is, obviously, we're talking about the wire work in this. I think there's elements of where they've just gone CGI in some of the other ones.
Right.
I think in Reloaded, there's that scene where Neo's
fights
fighting
like 100
Yeah,
Smiths,
and then that hasn't aged well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Because I actually, when I said I quite liked the second one, I think the plot's not much to speak about, but I remember there was like good action sequences.
Yeah.
But yeah, I haven't rewatched that big fight scene. Stuff like that.
I think like it's got good world building and that kind of thing, and they set it all up in this one. There's stuff you hear about like Zion. You want to see that human city. You want to see the the fields.
But then it's kind of crappy when we see Zion in the second film.
But yeah.
I know. I remember also Smith does get out of the Matrix. So we see a bit of what that could mean for him, but it's not. He does it by getting into a human body. He takes over a human body in the real world, I think.
Yeah, he does, doesn't he?
Being all naughty in the real world. I can't remember anything beyond that. He's trying to sabotage Zion, obviously. But that's not what Smith would have wanted. When he talks about getting out of the Matrix, presumably the standard route out is not hijacking a human persona. So we still don't know what that kind of looks like for him, I don't think.
So I think that in the other two, they go into more about the mythology of it. And I know in this film, they say it's closer to 2099 or something.
2199. It's been 200 years.
Yeah. Whereas I think later on you find out it's been a lot longer and it's just on
really?
a cycle.
Oh, yes. That's the big reveal of the third movie, I think, where Neo is the one, but he's not the first one.
There's
been hundreds and hundreds, and it's just on an endless cycle.
Yeah.
But do they actually end it? Do they give finality to it and he destroys it? I don't know.
So, well, either way, we know there's a fourth Matrix coming.
Yeah, so at the time of recording, that has just been confirmed, hasn't it? After dancing around that for a couple of years, I think.
Yeah. So how do you think a fourth Matrix would work?
They haven't revealed anything about the plot at the moment.
No, not as far as I know.
Do we know if Keanu Reeves is going to be
Keanu
in it?
Reeves in there and Carrie-Anne Moss. And yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it.
It's hard to speak on it because I can't remember how the third one ends.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's the setup of this one.
But given sort of like the way things are in 2019, what kind of elements do you think they would put in there? Would they have more of a different kind of like view on technology? Because technology is a lot more integrated now.
Yeah, I mean, that would be the route to go in, but it's interesting that Ghost in the Shell kind of did that 5 years before The Matrix did, that kind of integration. And that's what makes the world building so good. You know, I was saying that I really liked how realistic the city is because all of the technology in that is so internalized. And that's feels very realistic. It feels like the route that we would go down as a society,
Yeah.
and are going down. So yeah, I don't know what the Matrix take on that would be. I'd be interested to see a more back to basics approach. I don't know if Neo did destroy the Matrix, but it'd be interesting to see the kind of rebuilding of that. If that was what, maybe the machines are trying to fight back and rebuild and reinstate the Matrix.
And if there's
order.
other sort of like divisions, other groups,
Yeah.
like are there parts of the AI? Because I think some of the AI are on the human side later on, or something like that in the
Really?
sequels. I can't remember, but that would be an interesting concept.
Because Smith goes haywire, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He like takes over the Matrix, I think.
It's like, and just sort of seeing that and seeing how the AI's developed, and is there some sort of synchronization thing going on and that kind of thing. It just where can they go? Where can the Wachowskis go next?
I don't know, but one thing I thought when I was watching this movie, have you watched The Animatrix?
Yes.
I watched that. I remember watching that when it first came out.
That's a very good point as well, because the Animatrix came out before the sequels.
Yeah, I think it came out at the same time as Reloaded. It was half sort of promo for the second one.
Yeah.
Was the release of that. Yeah. I rewatched the two-parter that's like a prequel, basically, that it's like a anime that just rattles through about 50 odd years of AI and human history. Really good, really enjoyed that. And then I couldn't find any other ones on YouTube to watch them. But one big takeaway that I had watching The Matrix was I would love to see a short, about half-hour horror movie about the humans in one of the early Matrix that Smith talks about, where they tried to build it so it was a perfect world and they couldn't handle it. I mean, that would be an incredible horror movie of people just living in a perfect world and just slowly going completely insane because they can't handle the concept of a perfect world.
Yeah, and that's like it's a sort of like a recurring thing in which I think we mentioned in previous episodes. It's a sci-fi trope. If everything's perfect, you instantly think there's something wrong.
Yeah.
There's a dystopia underneath any sort of utopia that you can imagine.
Definitely. Let me just read through, because I wrote more notes on this than I have on any other film. I'm not going to read all of them. I just want to read all the times I wrote this down. Neo's mobile phone is so cool. Morpheus' sunglasses are so cool. The scream down the throat turning into a modem noise is so cool. Their outfits when they first go in the Matrix and Switch is just wearing white. It's so cool.
Switch is an interesting character as well.
Yeah, Switch is really interesting.
Do you know what they originally planned for Switch?
I don't want to guess because
what do you want to guess?
I don't want to get it wrong, but do tell me.
So from what I've heard is obviously the whole theme, the whole plot is very complex.
Yeah.
What they originally wanted Switch to do was to be like a man in the real world.
Yeah, okay.
And a woman in the Matrix.
That's what I had a feeling, and I didn't want to make any guesses given the history of the Wachowskis.
Yeah.
But you can see that in the way that she sees herself as different. Her residual self-image is different because we suddenly see, and Neo kind of clocks it, there's no rule that we all have to wear black leather.
Yeah.
She wants to wear white leather. And she's called Switch, so I can see how that would work, playing on that. I think she's great, and she has maybe the best line in the film, which is when she dies. It's very melodramatic, and I always quote it with friends for a laugh. But then watching it again, I remember, no, I actually love it. It's an incredible performance. It's really good when she just goes, not like this, not like this.
Yeah.
And then she dies.
Yeah.
It's really good. I think it's a funny line. I do find it a little bit funny, but I also think amazing performance. It's a really good line. It's like one of the best bits in the film.
And it's like there's lots of great side characters.
Yeah.
Like every single character on the Nebuchadnezzar is there for a reason.
Yeah.
Like you've got sort of like the red coat characters.
Is APOC?
Well, he's sort of like one of the sort of red coat characters that just go out
and Switch. To be fair,
yeah.
So there is that interesting stuff that
those
they
two definitely
could have explored, but
then you've got Dozer and his brother Tank.
Yeah. So one of them's the pilot, one of them's the operator.
Yeah, and they're born in the real world.
Yeah.
Yet they have like technological names, Tank and Dozer.
I wanted to. Right. I wrote this down actually, and I wanted to bring it up. When I was younger, it always bothered me that they were called Tank and Dozer, because in my head, because the older one's called Dozer, and in my head I was like, then why isn't the older one called Tank? This is ridiculous. This
He
is me
looks
being
like a
very
tank.
Yeah. Well, you didn't know that when he was a baby and you named him, but it's fine. But in my head, it was like, in my head, it would be like having two children and naming them Jerry and Tom.
Yeah, it's the wrong way round.
It's the wrong way round was my problem with it. But then watching it again, I was remembering having that thought when I was younger and then thinking, it doesn't matter. Tank and Dozer is not a saying outside of this film.
Tank and Dozer.
So do you see what I mean? Yeah. Do you see what I mean? I think it's because they're always referred to and introduced as this is Tank and Dozer's the older one.
Yeah, it's the wrong way round.
Yeah. So in my head, I was always like, well, the older one should be called Tank. But it doesn't mean that's not a pair. Like that's not. It's just me being a. I don't know. But I have such, James, I watched this film so many times. I had a lot of time to think about stuff.
Who else was there? There was Mouse as well.
Mouse is really annoying.
Yeah, Mouse is really annoying. Have you seen the red woman?
Yeah.
I made her.
But he says some interesting things about perception and perception of reality when he's talking about what does tasty wheat taste like. He's covering some good like philosophical ground. We've all had that kind of drunken conversation of how do I know that what you see as red is what I see as red. And it's the exact same conversation that he's having.
Yeah.
You have no idea what someone else's perception of reality is. It's interesting that they don't take that thinking into the real world in the Matrix because he's making a point about how they perceive things in the Matrix. Well, how do you know that you've got those shared experiences in the real world?
Yeah, exactly. It all just gets very complicated and it goes over my head. But yeah, that's something I thought about before. Like, if you see blue, is the blue the same color that everyone else sees?
You see something, and we've all agreed to call that thing blue, but we have no idea beyond that. And you just don't, and that's just a fact. And it's a concept that if you get too far into, you'll be thinking about it for ages, but you can't get any further than that because you will never experience blue or tasty wheat from someone else's eyes or taste buds.
God, so don't lose your mind though.
Do you know what it really reminds me of? Tasty wheat. Did you ever eat tasty wheat?
No, but technically neither did you.
Well, that's exactly my point. Exactly. Because you have to wonder now. How do the machines really know what tasty wheat tasted like, huh? Maybe they got it wrong. Maybe what I think tasty wheat tasted like actually tasted like oatmeal or tuna fish. That makes you wonder about a lot of things. You take chicken, for example. Maybe they couldn't figure out what to make chicken taste like, which is why chicken tastes like everything. And maybe they couldn't figure out.
The speech that he gives the machines at the end of this film is promising such a sense of finality. I'm going to show these people a world without you. And I just don't really ever feel like he does that in the sequels.
Yeah. I think that's where it lets it down.
Yeah.
Because you want to sort of like have him sort of... But then how would that work if everybody...
Well, he's sort of... if you take the kind of messianic theme of it, he's sort of promising to be a Jesus figure.
Yeah.
He's going to go... What's that look like, showing these people a world without you? Is it going around performing miracles and preaching the gospel of the machines are fooling you?
Yeah.
I am the one. Look what I can do. I can do this because this is a computer program and you need to break free. Which wouldn't be terribly useful because how do they break free?
Yeah.
And also the one big, like, again, I should just suspend my disbelief, but why do they make the Matrix? They've decided that if they put a human in a pod and use it for energy, that's quite efficient for them. Why do they need a computer program to keep them all compliant? Just keep them shut in the pod.
But then I think in order for them to be generating enough power for them to be considered batteries, they need to be sort of ticking over.
Okay.
So that's what I imagine.
Yeah, that's good explanation. Yeah.
There you go. Happy now, Matt.
Yeah, I'll tell you. Thanks, James. I'm glad we can meet up and have these chats.
I'm going to hang up this phone, and then I'm going to show these people what you don't want them to see. I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible.
In terms of these two films, what have we learned about AI? What's the moral of the episode today?
Well, I think I wanted to get your take on this for Ghost in the Shell, actually. I found it quite a hopeful outlook on humanity's interaction with AI. What about The Matrix? What do you think? How hopeful do you think The Matrix is?
Matrix isn't very hopeful. For me, it's the worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that in the world of Ghost in the Shell, they've had all those technological advancements, but it's been constantly throughout those developments weaved into human society neatly. Although Ghost in the Shell, the plot of the movie witnesses the birth of the first real AI that they're aware of.
Yeah.
Whereas The Matrix, that happened a long time ago and then things went wrong. But The Matrix's outlook, yeah, you're right. It's very pessimistic about what the interaction between humans and AIs will be like. And then the kind of pushback and the way out of that is of human versus AI war, essentially.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to get out of it. Whereas for all its grimness and violence and stylization, Ghost in the Shell is ultimately very hopeful because the Major makes a voluntary choice to couple with this AI and possibly create a new species.
Although it is quite sinister as well. You don't know what this new species is going to do afterwards.
Do you reckon? Because
I still felt a little bit creeped out by it. It may just have been the fact that it was Kusanagi's head on the body of a little girl, which freaked me out.
Yeah, which is weird. I didn't get that sense. I thought that it ended in a very optimistic way. She's looking out on the world and it had a sense of optimism, I thought. But you're absolutely right. That looking out on the world could be a creature looking to conquer.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't properly get a sense of it. But yeah, I think The Matrix is showing AI in the worst possible light, at least in this first film. I forget how it goes in the sequels.
It would be interesting to see, and you're right, it would be interesting to see if the new one takes a different route where the interaction between... That would be a really interesting way to go with it, is that they're starting anew maybe, and working with the machines, and the machines aren't just like this uniform thing. Maybe we'll see some of the culture within the machines if there's different characters to get to know there, which we do in the sequels, like the Merovingian.
Oh yeah,
I don't understand how that worked, but I know he was an AI.
And it's sort of like so the technology aspect now, it's so much a part of our lives. I mean, we're recording this podcast on a laptop. We're using technology to do this. We use technology every day. We're using the internet every day. I'm on my phone every 5 seconds checking Twitter and Facebook, which is really bad, by the way.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, can they incorporate that into the idea of The Matrix?
Yeah. Not easily, but yeah. It's definitely an
will
opportunity.
those themes come through in the new series?
Yeah, thematically, it'd be good to explore that. It's very difficult to, when you have a franchise like that that's tracked across decades, to acknowledge technological developments between 1999 and 2019, to track that progress when your plot is still set 200 years in the future without it looking crowbarred in.
What's it going to be like seeing an older version of Neo? What's that going to be like?
That could be really good in Neo.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what they're going to do with it, because having revisited the first film, it was so good, and they've had enough time now. Hopefully, if they've been scripting it all this time, or if they've had it in the back of their heads.
Yeah, definitely. Because I was discussing this with a friend, it's the difficult second album syndrome, which is The Matrix is phenomenal. And obviously they were thinking about this for years and years and years. And then obviously the studio wants a trilogy out of it. And those films are not as good because they haven't had years and years and years to just percolate those ideas and let them stew. And you see it a lot in Netflix series boom at the moment. A lot of these shows get so hyped up and they have such good reviews for their first season because maybe one creative person that was or a team were percolating on these ideas, and then they want another season in 12 months' time. It just doesn't...
Yeah.
It's not sustainable. So, yeah, you're right. The time between the disappointing sequels and now we're coming back to it 20 years after the original, yeah, I think they could have spent a long time thinking about what's the most interesting angle on that.
And it's interesting that everything's we talked about things being rebooted, and there's the nostalgia aspect of The Matrix. So it's interesting that they've brought this back, this particular franchise.
I'd like to see a move away from the things that I just listed as cool, you know?
Yeah. It's what was cool in the 90s
Yeah.
isn't going to be cool in 2019.
They need to reinvent that.
Yeah.
It needs to have a whole new style to it, but still be faithful to the original.
Hoping to see lots of wire work and bullet time and any new camera effects that you've got in your bag.
Yeah.
Wachowskis, please.
I think it's only one Wachowski.
Is it just one of the Wachowskis?
I think so. Yeah. I'm not sure. I think so.
Okay. Wow. Be exciting to see.
Yeah. So that's about all for this week. James, what's our theme for next week and what movies are we going to be looking at?
So next week, we're going to be looking at the idea of AI in control. So it's a theme which we've been exploring throughout the series so far. But the two films we're going to be looking at next week are Alphaville from 1965 and Tron from 1982. Now, it's a bit of a weird pairing. They're quite different tonally. One's a French film by Jean-Luc Godard. The other's a big budget computer graphic Disney film. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how AI is treated in both of those.
I've never seen Alphaville, so I'm looking forward to seeing that and talking about it.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for listening to the podcast. If you've liked it, please do subscribe to the podcast. We are on all the usual places. We're on iTunes, Podcatcher. You should be able to find us out on the internet. And if you do like it, please give us a review, give us a bit of feedback. 5 stars would be amazing if possible.
Yeah, 4 stars minimum.
4 stars minimum. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.